Once upon a time, the saying was trust the process. Now, it's El Plan. You need to believe in El Plan. You may wait a few months to know about it, but in time, you will know about El Plan. Welcome back to Motorsport 101.
Ah, very good. Very good, very good. Welcome to the Ferrari Formula One Racer episode 333 SP of Motorsport 101. I'm your friendly neighborhood host, Trey Harrison. Good to see you. And, yeah, Qatar was different, wasn't it?
Uh-huh.
I have come to one overriding conclusion over the course of this last week.
What's that?
Missed the bikes.
I think we all do.
I missed the bikes a lot. It was a weird paradoxical weekend for me. So watching Formula One cars go around this place with vastly different camera angles and a hell of a lot quicker. But hey, we had an okay Grand Prix out of it and a lot to talk about actually in a strange sort of sense. But we'll get through that in a minute. But let's go around the horn real quick. First with me, Mr. Ryan Eric King. Hello, sir.
Hello. Glad to be here as always. Interesting Grand Prix. Not the greatest Grand Prix, but it was solid.
Yeah. Like we'll talk a bit about it towards the end of the show. But yeah, it was different, but not necessarily in a bad way. We'll talk about that in a bit. Forgive me if I sounded a little bit rough. I was up till 3 a.m. last night watching our beloved basketball teams, my Lakers versus Kings Knicks. Kings Knicks came out on top. That was not very bing bong from my beloved Lakers. But here we are. I'm still struggling, but I will recover mentally and physically over the course of this podcast. Also, we have the man that totally did not dress for the occasion. I don't know what could have possibly happened for him to dig out the Alonso merch again. RJ O'Connell. Hello, sir.
Oh. I had no expectations of this return. I really didn't. Because what? Alpine had been good for maybe a podium or two. Alonso's coming back at age 40. There are younger drivers who could deserve an opportunity to race in Formula One, including several that are within the Alpine Academy. You know, I was fine. I was resigned. I was perfectly fine if Fernando Alonso never drove another season in Formula One. But he got back on the podium for the first time in 7 years, which we'll touch on during the show. But between my baseball team being good, championship winning good, things are looking good in the sporting sense for your boy up here in the middle of the New England-New York confluence. Things are good. I'm eating good tonight. It is American Thanksgiving holiday, everyone, and I hope if you are celebrating that you have a good time. If you don't particularly care to celebrate, or if you're in a tough family situation, which has kind of dented your enthusiasm for it, trust me, I understand, and that's fine too.
Hopefully on this podcast we'll still be eating good. I did actually forget to mention that, but to all our Americans out there, have a lovely Thanksgiving. Stay safe out there and get some good eating in you. And if you can, avoid the Detroit Lions playing football. That's just not worth it for anybody involved. No, nobody needs that on their Thanksgiving table.
It's like nobody needs to be dragged into an uncomfortable socio-political conversation with relatives that you don't speak to on a regular basis, and nobody needs to watch bad football on Thanksgiving.
Definitely avoidable in both cases. So we're going to talk the Qatar GP on this one, and Lewis Hamilton at it again.
No longer on brand.
No, it was a fun week. It was a fun week where you could say, yeah, it was 101 wins. Now it's 102. It's just a terrible number. It's just a waste. Like I don't like it. I wish you could have stayed on 101 for just a little bit longer. You know, oh god, all the Hamiltons are going to come after me now on social media. Shit. Look. It's fine. 102 is a fine number, honestly. So we'll talk all about that, how Verstappen came through a bit deeper in the field than he probably would have liked due to an incident on Saturday. we'll be talking about a certain right to review being rejected, because we did briefly mention this last week, and we got the outcome to that as well. RJ will talk about El Plan and how we got to that point, and Losail in general. It's going to be a lot of on and off track stuff to get through over the next 45 minutes to an hour or so. But in the meantime, here's places you can find us real quick. We're on youtube.com/motorsport101. We're on facebook.com/motorsport101. We're on Twitter at motorsport_101. We're fill our personal handles you can at Harrison101HD, at Ryan Eric King, at RJ O'Connell, and Cam, sadly isn't here this week. We'll be back next week, hopefully for the Valentino Rossi special. He's at cbuckley917. We're on Instagram, Motorsport101pod, and we're also on our website, motorsport101.com, where if you're up there right now, you can check me writing about the 2021 MotoGP season. By the time this episode goes out, all 3 parts will be up on there as well, talking about all the factory teams and some thoughts on 2021 in general. It's a good read, if I do say so myself. And if you really like,
my Cash App cash tag is. So
yeah, I did that lagged on my side just a little bit there. I'm sure Kig will cut that out in post. But yeah, if you really like us, you can back us financially on Patreon. Patreon.com/motorsport101. $5 gets you early access to all of our audio episodes. You can upgrade to 10 for the supporters club, as you can listen to these episodes live as they're being recorded, and get video access as well early. All of that good stuff. So, without further ado, let's get into the Qatar Grand Prix.
Stop me if you've heard this one before, but we're in Qatar. We had a lot of drama the weekend before the race. On Thursday, Mercedes had their right to review appeal into the incident of the Sao Paulo Grand Prix at Interlagos rejected by the stewards. Ironically, this was breaking news as both Toto Wolff and Christian Horner sat down for an FIA press conference together, 6 feet apart from one another, but in the same room. Great content. Let's get to qualifying. Lewis Hamilton on Saturday breaks the field over his knee for pole position number 102. Valtteri Bottas got a 3-place grid penalty, and Max Verstappen got a 5-place grid penalty for ignoring a single, then a double waved yellow on the home straight. Why? Because Pierre Gasly caught the outside curb, blew out a tire, and parked his AlphaTauri on the side of the road. So Botas, who was originally 3rd, was now moved to 6th, and Verstappen, who was originally 2nd, moved to 7th. So Pierre Gasly's wreck, which, if this happened in IndyCar, would have resulted in his fast lap being deleted. Instead, he starts on the front row, bumping the Alpine of Fernando Alonso to 3rd. We're on that in a bit. In our race, Hamilton led early doors. He led wire to wire. First time he'd done so all season. Verstappen passed a few cars at the start of the race because we're thinking there's no way anybody can overtake around here. Within a few laps, he's up to 2nd. Meanwhile, Valtteri Bottas, early on this race, spent a bit more time struggling to get around Lance Stroll than I think Toto Wolff was comfortable with. And then he caused the biggest flashpoint of the race after blowing his tire on lap 33 while trying a one-stop that effectively ended his race. He would eventually retire. 4 different drivers suffered blowouts. Him, both the Williams drivers, George Russell and Nicholas Latifi. Lando Norris dropped from 4th to 9th because of it. But you remember Fernando Alonso? Remember the 2-time world champion, youngest at the time? Remember the youngest race winner at the time when he won the 2003 Hungarian Grand Prix? You remember him, right? 2-time Le Mans winner, undefeated at Le Mans. You know, he made the one-stopper work. And despite late pressure from Sergio Perez, who had a crappy qualifying but come back to 4th, Nando completed the process. He said, you got to wait for a couple months, but you got to trust in El Plan. Fernando Alonso finishes 3rd for his first podium since the 2014 Hungarian Grand Prix. Now, we'll get into some things that have happened between podiums, but folks, I want to talk to you because it's on a lot of people's mind. Is Lewis Hamilton back in control of this championship?
Funny, because I did some digging about this at my current employer's website regarding this. Hamilton is back in the eyes of the bookies. He's title favorite again for the first time in about a month.
4-6.
He's 4-6. Verstappen is 6-5. If you are gambling, please gamble responsibly. But oh man, it's hard to say because I think these two entities, whether it be Hamilton or Verstappen or some combination of their cars, are so close, and the performances are.
Hi, Mrs. King.
And I think the performances are. Okay, let me just stop. I'll repeat my answer after King's back on. Yeah. Oh, good, King. I was going to say. Like, with Hamilton being 4-6 and Verstappen now 6-5, I think that's the first time Hamilton's been favourite in about a month. The point I was going to say is that it's like the combined entity of Hamilton and this Mercedes, and that Red Bull and Verstappen. It's so close, it's almost track dependent now as to who has the upper hand week on and week out. I mean, 3 weeks ago we were going crazy over Verstappen having seemingly taken control of it in Mexico. A week later, Hamilton pulls out his best weekend maybe ever. And now this one, which we all, I think, kind of had an inkling to think it might be a Red Bull track, it ended up being a Hamilton track, and he wins comfortably, lights the flag. So it's hard to say, man. It feels like it does, especially with Hamilton having that more powerful engine in the bank. But I cannot, with any real conviction, say one way or the other. I don't know how you guys feel about it. Is the internet sketchy on someone's end?
No, I thought RJ were going to say something.
No. I figured, King, if you have something if you have a take on it first, because I'm still trying to come up with one of my own.
Yeah, I'd say Hamilton certainly has the momentum at the moment, but in terms of, Hamilton needs to beat Verstappen in the next two races to win the championship. That's the end of story. That's the end of it. Verstappen, realistically, if he just wins one of the next two races, he'll be champion.
Yeah, there are actual scenarios where Verstappen can clinch in our next race. If he wins and Hamilton finishes outside the top six, it's his. What it basically boils down to. I still feel like it's advantage Verstappen unless proven otherwise. And, ideally, we'd love to have another Hamilton ahead of Verstappen 1-2 finish so that it goes all the way to the wire when it's a winner-take-all race going into Abu Dhabi. I mean, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, first final round decider in half a decade. When 2016 was the last time it had gone the distance like that. Mm-hmm. And even then, it was a bit of a case of, Rosberg just has to follow Hamilton home. So a little bit of the intrigue was kind of lost on that one. So if we got it where it was close enough, so let's assume Hamilton wins in Abu Dhabi. In Jeddah next week, and it's maybe the gap's maybe 1 point. Could be all square depending on where the fastest lap point ends up as well. I mean, again, who knows? I mean, I'm assuming it's going to be those two first and second because I did some number crunching on this. 30 of the top 40 top two spots in the field this season has been either Hamilton or Verstappen. Verstappen's had 16 top two finishes this season out of 20 rounds. Hamilton's had 14. So it's kind of a fair assumption to think they're going to finish 1-2 in either order. I would love to see a winner-take-all finale, especially on an Abu Dhabi track that's reconfigured. I mean, goodness only knows what's going to happen.
Ultimate litmus test. If Abu Dhabi cannot produce an exciting title decider under those set of circumstances after the track renovation, I don't know what hope there is for it as a Formula One venue. in the eyes of people. And not just that, we've also got a constructors championship that is down to 5 points in it.
Could you imagine if for the first time since '08 we could get a split where it's not the same driver's team and then the different manufacturer wins? I think the teams care far more about the drivers, because I remember in '08, I remember that Hamilton won the driver's title, and I remember Ferrari won the Constructors' Championship. I don't think the Ferrari team were jumping up and down that they just won the Constructors' title.
No, they weren't jumping up and down because they just had their heart ripped out in the 30 seconds after the checkered flag of Brazil.
What prize money would there be if it were not for some vibes on the side as well? But I think it's incredibly close. I think it's too close to call, and I think it's kind of hectic that people are just going out of their way to say tile it over one way or the other, because people had that thought after the grid penalty that Verstappen had, which we'll get to in a minute. But it's so close to call right now, and that's brilliant. The fact that I don't know is awesome, and that should be championed and celebrated, because that is a rare thing to say in an F1 season with 2 rounds to go.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that in mind, we've got to talk about another major flashpoint, but one we only had on the Thursday. And that was a press conference between Horner and Wolff, and then the stewards conveniently dropping in the middle of that the right to review that Mercedes lodged after Brazil being rejected. And I read this report, and it was on the grounds of the new evidence that was presented, i.e. we didn't get the onboard from Max Verstappen's car until Tuesday. It was deemed that was not significant enough as new evidence to activate a right to review.
You know what they should have done is have Alex Albon recreate it back at Silverstone.
Yeah, just recreate a couple of lines.
Really would have done.
You know, I mean, so with that in mind, I mean, what did you guys think of it? Well, do you think the stewards got this right, i.e. that this was not enough to prompt a second look?
Well, I mean, yeah, I agree with them. Like, the new evidence didn't really change my opinion on what happened.
Yeah. My opinion on what happened is that it should have... Yeah, I think my opinion at the time is that it should have probably warranted an investigation if I look at it objectively. Obviously, that didn't happen, and you have a bunch of drivers who are now vocally confused about, like, so what is and is not over the line. I do find it interesting that, like, in the discussions that they had during the Qatar Grand Prix, that, like, it seemed like the only person who was consistently like, oh yeah, we came out of this meeting and we knew exactly what to expect. Max was the only dude that felt like that. Oh yeah, it's clear to me. I'm not sure about everybody else.
Max, I had like, I'm good. I know exactly what I need to do here. I am covered. I am sorted. I mean, my personal opinion, I said it last week. I said if you put a gun to my head, it was probably a 5-second time penalty for Verstappen for what he did, because I think there is one rule he definitely broke, and that was leaving the track and gaining a lasting advantage. Because he did gain a lasting advantage. He bought himself a couple more laps because it put the gap back over a second again in the direct aftermath of the incident. If the stewards didn't deem that being worth looking at the first time round, the onboard is not going to give us anything to say, let's look at it again, Chief. So I think the stewards had already written themselves into a corner on this one, personally, because you didn't need Verstappen's onboard, in my opinion, to tell that he had blatantly broken that rule. But I think the stewards are in a nice tall glass of let them race, and I think they have to. I think they were almost forced into letting that stand. I love the fact that Lewis Hamilton said straight after the meeting that, you know, we wanted more clarity about these decisions. And then I think it was Michael Massey that straight up said to him, expect different decisions of different stewards. And I was just like sitting there going, hey, we've seen this one before, haven't we?
Having like been in the presence of Michael Massey, that is like pretty much dead on, like his body language and expression and how he would explain things. It's great.
Massey's just fed up at this point. I think he just wants his season to be over. He's just like, I'm fed up with this shit. Just like, can we have the off season now, please?
I just want to crank back and enjoy a VB long neck at Outback Steakhouse. You know what I mean?
That was a bit too on the nose.
Oh yeah, we're gonna kick England's ass in the cricket.
Oh, we know. They've already won the World Cup. I mean, geez. I mean, yeah. Again, I can only echo this. I don't think that on board. I'm a complete agreement with King. I don't think that on board showed us anything that we didn't already know of this incident. It didn't change my mind in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. If anything, I think it made it actually a little bit less clear-cut as to what had happened, because there wasn't this blatant knee-jerk reaction on the steering wheel. It was just that Verstappen did what I like to call the Schumacher marginal call, where it was like, I'm going to run him off the track and let the stewards make the decision. And the stewards are like...
Yeah, it's like... It was a very controlled understeer, to put it that way.
Mm-hmm. There's big inverted commas out here going around if you're not listening on or watching on video, I should say. Yeah, it is. For me, I don't think there was anything in that. I completely understand Merckx having a go, because that's their right. They have nothing to lose, and they potentially had 3 points to gain out of it. That is the sort of thing that I could see was worth asking the question, at least. But to me, I don't think that there was anything there that was, you know, worth another look, so to speak. On
the subject of penalties, Saturday at the end of qualifying, Pierre Gasly blows out a tire because the edges of these curbs are rough. Obviously, Botas gets a penalty, 3-place grid drop. Verstappen gets a 5-place grid drop. Christian Horner gets a slap on the wrist and has to do community service for some things that he said after the decision was levied. We'll talk about that in a bit. Are we okay with the penalties for Verstappen and Botas? Because there is precedent. I think it's kind of curious that, like, Sainz didn't get anything. I guess they didn't show him a yellow flag, so like...
No. So they did show Sainz a yellow flag, but they were able to prove through telemetry that Sainz had slowed.
Okay, yeah, I misremembered there. But obviously, for Botas and Verstappen did not get the same benefit of that. Max Verstappen's actually gotten a few post-qualifying penalties. Remember when he snitched on himself after Mexico that one year? That always lives rent-free in my head. I love Seb's quote as well, like after the qualifying sessions, like, you know, I had to back off because I knew Max was coming.
Sassy Seb. I think, you know what's funny about this? Well, I wrote about this on the website as well. I said, I think Carlos Sainz is exactly the reason why those two got punished. Not so much Valtteri, because I read the stewards' notes, and Bottas essentially pled guilty. He was like, no, I did see the flag, and no, I didn't slow down. He basically admitted as such in the meeting, and was like, you got me. And he just took his penalty. I think Verstappen argued his case a little bit more. I think because Carlos Sainz slowed down of his own volition once he saw the flag, I think that was the common sense argument to definitely give Bottas and Verstappen penalties. To be fair, there was no yellow flags on the race control screen, and there was no yellow light warning on Verstappen's dashboard. And I remember this from the 2012 title fight between Alonso and Vettel, and what Alonso tried to do Sebastian for flag supersede lights. And there was It's an obscure one, but there was a double waved yellow on the side, and that I think if Sainz had not slowed down, I think there might have been potentially more ground for mitigation. But because Sainz did the sensible thing, it's like, well, he could do it. Why didn't you do it? And I think that's what probably got them the penalty. I didn't have a particularly big problem with that. I know they've really tried to clamp down on, especially on double waved yellows in the last couple of years.
Oh yeah.
With what happened at Imola last year, what happened in Austria earlier this year. I think it was Nikita Mazepin that got
Nikita and Nicholas Latifi 30-second time penalties after the race.
Yeah, and free penalty points on the license.
We had an incident in Turkey where that basically just said, like, yeah, if you set a hot lap in a double wave yellow zone, it gets deleted.
Yeah. Which I don't think came up here for some strange reason.
Yeah, that was weird. That was weird because I'm just like, I see this happen. I see that Verstappen improves as he's driving by gasoline, like, Did they rescind the lap time deleted rule and I just didn't hear about it?
Or it probably was never a rule in the first place and just like a race control directive for that one particular race, and they're like, we forgot to add this.
I went and looked over the steward notes. It says it's still there, but it didn't come into factor. But obviously then we had like the 3 race grid penalties, so that ended up being the punishment. And oh boy, we had another long wait for a decision after qualifying, which pushed it all the way to hours before the race before we knew it was actually starting where. Is this getting a little bit overboard?
I don't know.
I saw a very well written piece by Dieter over at racefans.net talking about this today. And like, did you know a fun fact? Did you know that Netflix was filming that Toto Wolff Christian Horner press conference on Thursday?
That's smart. They missed the opportunity to see Verstappen touching the wing at Sao Paulo. They're just like, oh, we're not missing any of this. Again, they do not have to punch up any drama. They don't have to embellish anything. Like, people got tweaked out about them embellishing a Norris versus Sainz rivalry. They don't have to embellish shit this year.
No, not a sausage.
No. You can ethically pirate it this series next year because it's the right thing to do. But yeah, it's they don't need to embellish shit.
No, I was saying, like, Netflix was in the room during that press conference on Thursday, despite not being a part of apparent F1's travelling bubble. Netflix was in the room during that press conference, and then, of course, the announcement came out during that press conference that the FIA themselves organised before the weekend had started. Now, I don't know if they pluck these driver pairings or team boss pairings out at random, where they draw lots out of a hat, or whether it's deliberately planned this way, but we've had 3 major investigations that took the better part of 24 hours to sort out. I really don't think the Verstappen Sainz Bottas incident from Saturday night needed an entire day's worth of going over the footage and checking what had happened.
I know it's late in Qatar at the time that this is all going down, but like... if something like this were to happen in Formula E, they would be staying up all night. They'd be getting like 4 or 5 cups of coffee to figure this shit out.
Like, that in combination with the Mercedes incident at Brazil, I know that was a bit more understandable because they had to test the rear wing multiple times over, and and then of course the Verstappen wing check incidents in there. The stroking of the wing had to be potentially a mitigating factor as well. It all does smell a little bit Hollywood. I know people on Twitter are a lot more cynical about this now because they're digging up the rule book left, right, and centre. I know the one that came up a lot on Sunday morning was we've meant to have a final grid of 4 hours before the start, and that's never been a consistent thing as far as I'm concerned. I've seen many a race where they're still ironing out decisions before the grid's formed.
Yeah, we had that at the very first race of last season. The first race of these uncertain times. And I think they were moving Hamilton's car back within like an hour to the race start.
Right.
If I remember it correctly.
So I think people are going out of their way to a degree to try and smear the FIA or smear the race control incorrectly. I think there are some things you can absolutely be critical of them for, but I don't think that's one of them, personally. But it does freak a little bit of trying to fan the flames a little bit with how long some of these decisions are taken. I really don't think this one in particular in Qatar was a 24-hour job, essentially,
I
to
really
iron
just
all
think
that
they were
out.
tired and wanted to go to bed. Just want to sleep on it, and we'll determine on the morning when we have a whole rest of the day to ponder it.
It's like, lads, we could sort this out, or we could go for dinner.
We'll go to Nando's.
I'm not sure. Is there a Nando's in Losail? I don't know, but I mean, King, I know you're on the fence. I mean, how do you feel about it? Because I think because you know the FIA and how they operate a little bit more than most people do, and so I'm curious to see what you think.
I mean, like, sure. Is it inconvenient that the final grid came out this late? Yes. Well, did this actually affect the race at all? Did the race have to be delayed or something of that measure? No, it didn't. Like, should this be something we should avoid? Yes. But is this like a crisis? No.
If you need to know, I did do a search, and there are 7 Nando's locations in and around the city of Doha.
There we go.
And that's near Losail.
So yeah, good. So yeah, they clearly got the urge for some peri peri chicken and thought, we'll settle this in the morning. Look, this is not an issue. I think a lot of this is just drama for drama's sake. I think this isn't a incredibly dramatic title fight, and every little thing is going to get amped up by 10 because one of the people involved was a title contender. And that's Max Verstappen, obviously, and arguably the most, galaxy brain flashpoint since Silverstone, or maybe Monza, depending on how you want to look at it, and what your opinion was on that incident one way or another. This is not no crisis. You mean, like, we're still waiting the same amount of time for a Grand Prix regardless. It's not like, I guess King says, it's not like you're kicking the Grand Prix down the curb for an hour and a half to figure this out. But I do think it's a bit strange that took the best part of 24 hours to clear. But, when we're seeing things like Netflix filming press conferences, I'm just like, it's going to raise an eyebrow with certain people. And, hey, it's dramatic title fight. Isn't this what we all wanted?
This is what we all wanted, and we don't want it decided by the stewards. Unless it's decided by the stewards in favor of the driver that I'm more partial to.
Yeah, there's still hope for Sebastian Vettel to get back in this title fight via steward disqualifications. Sure, we can figure that out.
Just exclude everybody else ahead of him from the championship. It's fine.
Sure, why not? RJ, talk to me about your mans.
Oh, gosh. What a day. What a weekend. Alpine did not look good to start the weekend, and then they gradually got better. This seems to be like a track that was much like Istanbul Park, where they did particularly well. The prevailing theory and the recommendation from Pirelli was that 2 stops is the way to go. 1 stop would really be pushing it. But Alonso made it 34 laps on a set of hard tires. He did have some help, of course. Sergio Perez did have a much faster car and probably would have caught him if not for a virtual safety car. And also there was an incident early in the race that may have gotten overlooked. But you remember when it's like Esteban Ocon and Sergio Perez, I believe they're racing for position. And they're coming up to Charles Leclerc, who's like about to come into the pits. And then he locks up and it takes Perez a little bit longer to get past. That may have had a factor in it too. Alonso drove superbly today, this weekend. He did. There's little else to say about that. It seems like he, even though he is now past the age of 40, he's always been fit enough. And if he has invested enough, he's always had the skill to do this. I don't think his skill or his physical condition is deteriorated, and it seems like he's genuinely having fun. I feel like, his ego has softened a little bit in his old age, knowing that he has accomplished pretty much all that he can at this point. I think in the back of his mind, he realizes that 3 titles probably isn't going to happen. But, if he can help Alpine turn things around, because they've already got a win under his belt, and obviously they want to sustain that. So they say, hey, they're going to secure 5th place in the Constructors' Championship after AlphaTauri. AlphaTauri had a vintage Toro Rosso weekend where they were hot shit in qualifying and then nowhere in the race.
Yeah.
And they didn't help themselves much with their own pit strategy. And, credit as well, because there were other drivers that made a one-stopper work to their advantage. Esteban Ocon, Lance Stroll. I can't speak for Lando Norris and George Russell. I mean, that sucks. Obviously people are going to be like, how could Pirelli, who recommended a 2-stop race, how could they not build a tire that would go for 1 stops? But, yeah, I'm obviously very happy to see that. It's been a long time. I didn't ever think I would ever see Fernando Alonso on a Formula 1 podium. I didn't think it would be this year, if ever again. But, I think a lot of people, unless you have, deep-rooted Alonso hatred in your heart, I can't speak for you, and that's fine, whatever. But I think the general populace, everybody likes seeing Fernando Alonso on the podium. I think everybody was just, happy for this dude. He's finally back after all these years in the wilderness.
As a guy that used to have a deep-rooted hatred of Fernando Alonso, even I was like, yeah, well played, Nando, well played. That was an excellent drive, and I still love that Lando Norris was like, these Pirellis are too dangerous, and I'm just like,
George Russell was just like, whatever. Just one of those racing deals.
Lando was like, these tires are too dangerous.
Not all young, early 20-something English twigs are built the same.
Can't relate. But no, like I said, good Fernando. Great job for Alpine. Fantastic weekend. A critical weekend in their fight for 5th in the Constructors, given they were 3rd and 5th on the day. Shout out to Lance Stroll. I want to say that's his best result of the year.
Yeah, that's his best finish of the year, and he'd been coming off some terrible, terrible weekends. If Vettel, I hate that Vettel didn't get such a good start off the line, because I feel like there's opportunities for double points for Aston Martin.
Yeah, you dropped the 17th off because he went wide on the dirty side of the track on the first corner. About half a dozen cars did not get in the breaking point right.
Yeah, the only thing that took the heat off of him was Valtteri Bottas dropping to 11th on the opening lap and getting stuck behind the aforementioned Lance Stroll. Again, at times I wonder if there are any good second drivers.
It swings on a dime these days.
Yeah.
Now I have to mention this because we warm up with a little pre-show before we get going. We had a discussion about a list of things that have happened in the world since Fernando Alonso's last podium. For those guys who don't know, first and foremost, it's terrifying to me that Fernando Alonso has 98 career podiums at the same time where a man has 102 race victories. And Alonso is clearly one of the top 10 to 15 drivers ever. And it's a strange vibe. But his last podium, for those who didn't know, was the 2014 Hungarian Grand Prix. That was for Fernando personally 107 Grand Prix ago. So in that time, a lot of things were different in motorsport and the world in general back then.
Yeah,
so
it was.
Here's a few that we came up with. So things that have happened since Hungary 2014. Lewis Hamilton and Marc Marquez only had 1 world championship each, and Max Verstappen had not even debuted yet.
Yeah, Max Verstappen was going through it in the wars in the European Formula 3 Championship with Esteban Ocon. And we had not reached the apex of the Max Verstappen bidding war, because there was a bidding war between Mercedes and Red Bull. But ultimately, what swung in favor of Red Bull was that Red Bull were willing to give him a drive in F1 much sooner than Mercedes had. And you start to think, if Max Verstappen had gone to Mercedes, there may have been a chance that Max Verstappen was the greatest prospect that never made it to Formula 1 if their track record with handling Pascal Wehrlein, Esteban Ocon, Felix Rosenqvist, If that had if that had happened, like, whew, could you imagine?
That's a scary thought. Our reigning MotoGP world champion, Fabio Cordaro, our brand new champ for 2021, he'd only just made his debut in Moto3 at age 15. That was the first year of him at world championship level. The hottest social media trend at the time was us pouring ice buckets on our heads for ALS, and for those in the UK, better known as MND, motor neuron disease, including me. If you want to find it, go on my old channel at Harrison 101 from years ago. You can probably, if you ever want the amusement of having a bucket of water over my head, it's on there somewhere. The world's most hyped movie at the time was Guardians of the Galaxy, that was due out the following week.
Oh yeah. That I remember the first time being able to watch that in film. That was a good time. And I know Chris Pratt. I know we know that Chris Pratt's not as cool a dude as we thought when this movie came out. But it's just like you can't take away like all the enjoyment that you have when you see this movie for the first time. It's like, this is when the Marvel Cinematic Universe peaked before it really jumped the shark. It's either that or the release of Avengers.
Yeah, got to screen it there.
Going back to just some motorsport things, Alex Palou, much like Max Verstappen, had just gone out of karting, but unlike Max Verstappen, who is in the main European Championship in Formula 3, Alex Palou is racing in Euro Formula Open for Adrian Campos' team. Wonder what happened to him. Oh yeah, current IndyCar Series champion by way of a stay in Japan. Formula E did not exist, and neither did this podcast that is in its current form.
Yeah, for those guys who don't know, maybe newer viewers, our first ever episode was after the 2014 Russian Grand Prix, its first appearance on the calendar at Sochi. That was in October, I believe, that year. Hungary is a bit earlier than in the calendar. So this podcast, as you know, it was not a thing when Fernando Alonso was last on an F1 podium. So, there you go. Formula E's first ever race was later on that year, I think I want to say in September.
First year of the NASCAR playoffs, too.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
We're going south here quickly.
But Marc Marquez did win 10 in a row.
Yeah.
And started to learn that he is that good, as well as our 8-time and reigning world champion of rallying, Sebastian Ogier, who had just won a second world title. But I'm sure that it's all just the product of a busted Volkswagen Polo. And if he had gone to any other manufacturer, he would not be as successful. 8 championships with 3 different manufacturers at the end of his full-time career? Okay. Some things that happen in sports. Germany beat Brazil 7-1 in a World Cup semifinal. LeBron James comes back to Cleveland, wins them a championship. Cleveland, this is for you. And then leaves again to join the Lakers. Nippon Professional Baseball's all-time hits leader, Isao Harimoto, goes on the record talking about a player on the Hokkaido Nippon Ham Fighters who is, and I want to make sure I have the quote right, he's being childish. His selfish desire to hit is taking bats away from real players, angering his teammates, and keeping him from being the player he could be. This was about a 19-year-old kid who had 10 home runs and 212 at-bats as a designated hitter and as a pitcher. You might know him. He's the undisputed, unanimous American League MVP, Shohei Ohtani. Funny how that works.
Amazing. The Ebola virus was just becoming a thing. It was just starting to hit mainstream press. We learned so much about the world and deadly diseases in the 6 years prior, haven't we?
Yeah, that's right. Between Ebola, between Zika, we're prepared. So that way, if something worse comes up, we know to take care of this and act in the best interest of other people around us and not ourselves.
Yeah, as you do. We learned a lot from that back then, clearly. Fernando Alonso himself would go on to drive for 3 different teams in Formula 1, take a break, come back, celebrate his 40th birthday, win Le Mans, enter 2 different Indy 500s, failing to qualify in one of them, and race in the Dakar. What a career. What a life. I can't wait for Fernando to write a book. That's going to be fascinating, quite
We
frankly.
are in the infancy of like the PlayStation 4 Xbox One generation. The Horizon Festival has gone from Southern Europe to Australia to Scotland, and now most recently to Mexico with the release of Forza Horizon 5 as one of the most popular games in the world upon its release. It's just wild.
10 million players first week for Forza Horizon 5. Crazy stuff.
Louis Van Gaal just took over Man United. The David Moyes era had just ended, but, I'm sure it's not going to get this bad in the future.
No, never. Never. Not at all.
To the end of the year.
No. I swear to God.
No, we're not cycling managers out every 24 months. Also, some failed New York real estate mogul and reality TV star had his entire political career from opening to 4 years of terrible, like it's happening and then it's done.
Oh, that was a bumpy road back then. Oh, jeez. Also, shout out to our friend in the chat, James Galantis, had to get a couple more for Australia. The Aussies beat England 5-0 in the Ashes series. Thanks for reminding me, James. The one English guy in the chat. And then Conor McGregor would also make his UFC debut and retire 5 times since. A couple of good ones in there from him. So shout out to James there on that one. But a lot has happened in the world since then, but good for Fernando for coming back on there. His 98th career podium and his first since coming back with Alpine. Was driver of the day as well, voted for by the fans. So, yeah, it's proof out there that Alonso can still beat Hamilton, at least in a popularity contest. Now, while the Hamilton fans like their pitchforks and find my house, before we get out of here, fellas, what did you make of the track and just the Grand Prix in general? Because obviously there was a lot of talk about this place. It came up pretty last minute. Much more known as a MotoGP track. It's their season opener for those that aren't the biggest bike fans in the world. How did you guys feel about it?
You know what I thought? I thought it was better than I think people were worried about. I'm not going to tell you that this is like the greatest Formula One track, but you remember it was several years ago where we had like a discussion about like proposing like a completely alternate Formula One calendar made up of events that are like not on the calendar to replace the ones that we have. And I want to say I propose Qatar as like an alternate to Bahrain if we had the chance. I'll admit this wasn't like a total classic, but it was better than you think. Obviously, like the slipstream in the DRS was like the only way you could pass. It was so broken. And then, of course, to the rest of the track. It's a fun time trial track, but a lot of those high-speed corners are just brutal to follow through. Yeah. But I think people liked it, and I'm almost kind of sad that we're, like, only doing this once before we're going to another streetish course in Doha.
Yeah, King, what did you make of it, man?
Yeah, pretty much agreeing with RJ, where it's like, it wasn't as bad as people, like, dreaded on social media, but it's pretty much exactly what the teams thought it was going to be, where it's going to be hard to follow, only real overtaking's the main straight with DRS.
Guilty is charged as bike fan first here. I thought this was going to be terrible. It ended up being okay, and I will take okay. Okay is fine, given my level of expectations here.
A solid 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I had it as a 5.5. I thought it was a decent race. I really can't complain about this one too much. I actually thought, I remember actually having Red Bull tell Verstappen on the radio, passing is actually easier than we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, and that's before they told Gasly to move over.
They said Max is not our race. What possible other way could that be misconstrued? As he goes wide. No, I was going to say, look, I don't think this was bad. I actually was. I said to myself after the race, I was like, I actually wouldn't mind if they came back here, because there's other tracks on the calendar that are just as mediocre, if not worse, than this one. I think the cars actually could follow each other reasonably well, a lot better than I thought they could. Around here, I thought it was going to be like a 1.5 seconds deltas everywhere, and just be getting no racing at all. That wasn't the case. You could follow. I don't think the DRS was too overpowered. You could defend into turn 1 as well. It wasn't a conveyor belt for a pass. this did a lot of things right. And I didn't have a major problem with this as a track at all. I thought it was interesting. Although, for those fun bike versus F1 comparison guys out there, fastest lap of the weekend, 32-second difference between Formula 1 and Francisco Bagnaya's MotoGP lap record he set earlier in the year.
So much easier to corner with 4 wheels.
I know, 20 times the contact batch. Who'd have thunk it? Although, bike's way faster in a straight line, so we'll take that. 225 mph. Take that, Sarko. Go on, son. We'll have that. Like I said, I actually would not mind it if we came back here on a semi-regular basis. But of course, we're getting another fucking street circuit. Because this sport can't help themselves with street circuits.
Gotta bring the racing to where the fans are.
Of course. Yeah, I thought it was fine. I thought it was an acceptable Grand Prix, and that's good enough for me. So yeah, Qatar will be back in a couple of years' time, 2023 after the World Cup. We saw a lot of World Cup cross promotion over the course of the weekend. Did you guys as well see David Beckham, John Terry, and Andrea Pirlo rolling up for the weekend?
Jeez, what year is it?
One very classy gentleman and John Terry. You
want to talk about careers that may or may not have peaked in 2005.
Very true. We'll have that. We're on a gap week for Formula One because we are a week off. The last gap week of the year. We'll be back in the week after for the first Saudi Arabian Grand Prix coming to you from the streets of Jeddah. In the meantime, as mentioned, you may have seen it on social media, we'll talk about it a little bit as well. There'll be a special on next week's episode. It'll be live streamed on YouTube with the 4 of us.
No, it's not. It's not live.
It's not live? Oh, okay, I'll start that again in a minute. But, yeah. So, yeah, we have a gap meet next week, so obviously there'll be no Formula 1 race. We're back from Saudi Arabia in the streets of Jeddah in 2 weeks' time, but we're going to have a little special put up in between on Valentino Rossi's career, so that'll be out in the week in between that and Jeddah. So we'll still be getting some content between now and F1 season kicking in again. It's still kind of weird that we're in the last week of November and we've still got 3 weeks to go in this F1 season. It's a strange one. We're getting a race 2 weeks before Christmas. What a time. But yeah, Qatar was okay. We'll take that. So yeah, we'll be back in a couple of weeks' time for Jeddah. Check out the Valentino Rossi special in the interim as that goes up. So, places you can find us one more time before we get out of here. YouTube.com/Motorsport101. Facebook.com, same address there. Twitter at Motorsport_101. Our personal handles on the screen right now at Harrison101HD, at Ryan Eric King, at RJ O'Connell. Cam's usually at CBuckley917. We're on Instagram at Motorsport101pod. Our website, motorsport101.com. If you want to see our full MotoGP season review coverage, you can go up there as well. And of course, you can back us financially on Patreon, patreon.com/Motorsport101. $5 gets you early access to one of our audio episodes, $10 for the video version, and access to the Supporters Club, where you can listen to these episodes live as they're being recorded, as Vic, Jason, and James did. Thanks, guys, for chipping in, as ever. Thanks, guys, for watching. We'll be back for a Rossi special next week. If not, see you in F1 for a couple of weeks' time from Jeddah. But until then, I've been Dre Harrison, David Ryan, Eric King, and RJ O'Connell. Till next time, sayonara.
Later, y'all. Oh.
Bye.
Later, y'all.
I love that we had to get 2 awkward exits this week rather than the usual one we had. Like, where to go, fellas? We lose 1 seat and all hell breaks loose.